question that sounds off-center, but what I kept hearing were job opportunities. Seems like there's lots more education that's needed. We have young people in high school and college. We have a CRA in St. Petersburg where there are people really looking for jobs. I'm curious, are there entry-level kinds of jobs? Are there other levels that high school and college students might be starting to plan in for what sounds like lots of work ahead?
Noah says, Cece, do you want to answer that with FFMA? Well, one of the things that I could say is we are going to be opening up a student membership through Florida Floodplain Managers Association that will be a great way for young folks to kind of get their feet wet, no pun intended, into the world of like flood risk. And I think the big challenge for people, especially high school and college students coming out of school these days is, you know, people are looking for what kind of experience do you have? You know what I mean? So being able to do things, unfortunately, they may not be paying jobs right away, but they could be something where they're volunteering. A lot of work that we do with the Program for Public Information is people volunteering their time to assist us, you know, so that's where we get a lot of that. But I also feel like, you know, to have them be able to have those opportunities to start getting involved is important.
I would also add, if we kind of go back to our first talk from Thomas and talking about sea level rise, as we look to the uncertain future, there's definitely going to be a lot of job opportunities for innovators and engineers and, you know, these young folks thinking outside the box and into a new future. Chris.
I was going to say, building on that real quick too, I also saw some kind of newsletter I think sent out by ASFPM, the Association of State Floodplain Managers, and they were talking about how CFMs were just growing exponentially in the United States, especially in Florida where we have all this flooding. So there are job opportunities for people that want to go and take a CFM. You don't need a college degree to take a CFM. You just need to study. It is not an easy test, but you know, anybody can pass it. If I passed it, you can do it. So.
University of Florida actually has it. I think it's University of Florida, FDM, is working with one of the universities, I think it's University of Florida, on a CFM sort of program. I think it's a graduate certificate. So that's another option if you want to expand the education. I heard Jones Edmonds is hiring too.
We already did. we have the student, at least one student intern already working in CRA.
So I'll add on to this because we know returning veterans is another opportunity. We have wonderful training in the military. Are people strategically thinking of what that flow stream, excuse that money, from military, high school kids, that whole marketplace, people coming out of prison having a hard time finding jobs. All these different places are sort of backed up. They don't find ways to get jobs. This just sounds like such a big opportunity. We've been hearing for some time that water management is one where people are retiring, and that word is probably out. But this is a new one where it seems to me this could be your professional organization could start looking strategically, particularly in our Tampa Bay areas with the students and with the career development people, business, I guess.
And one of the other things that we have through FFMA is when we have job opportunities come up, people email us that opportunity, and we put that on the website and send a blast out too for that.
We have Chris next, and then
I wanted to comment on the job opportunities, if I could, move to another question. This St. Petersburg area is home to a lot of write-your-own flood carriers in addition to Wright Flood. American Strategic Insurance Company is located here, Bankers Insurance Company, I'm trying to think who else, but there's a lot of opportunities. I know Wright Flood does hire temps. Michelle is a college student and she's interning with us. She's out of LSU. So I would encourage any young folks to approach the local insurance companies because the changes coming up in October are massive.
They won't know to do that. See, that's the issue. Is where's the bridge of communication? How will they know?
They would have to go to the Human Resource Department of each of those carriers. If there's claims activity, if we get hit with Colin, it might be coming soon, there's opportunities for temps to come in and just assist with the claims. So, but you would have to go to each individual carrier and go to their HR department and see what's available.
And joking aside, all the engineering firms around, they do hire interns. So Jones Edmonds just hired their summer intern, but they usually hire a couple. So they are looking for other interns. And
We do, but we usually also post at the colleges. So the colleges usually have access to, at least for the engineering.
What's your comment on that?
Yeah, no, that's kind of more of a known thing in colleges. They tell you to just go to the companies and tell you to ask for internships. You don't just wait for someone to post something. You have to be proactive, and those are the type of people you want in the agencies anyways, the people who go and ask for these internships and ask for these opportunities.
So that comment was that in colleges they're told to be proactive and go to the companies and seek out positions. Is that on this topic? Or, okay.
Might I suggest you think bigger? And we have professional organizations in all of these different areas, with engineers, with insurance agencies, with everybody else. And I work with the veterans who are retiring from the military now, and also the reservists who are looking for positions. There's a way to network with the chambers. There's a way to network and get word out that there potentially are jobs in those areas later. And as the professional organizations, I would think you would want to make those connections to start feeding that line and develop that training.
Yeah, we would love to do that. So if you tell me who those people are
Talk
that
to
you
me.
can send the emails to them, we will. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Chris?
Just first of all, I wanted to thank the panelists and the event organizers. I mean, it was just incredibly informative, so much appreciated. I was wondering, with the discussion of rate increases and the legislative discussions, has it ever been, has the topic of the insured's income being tied toward the rate increase ever come up that you're aware of? It just strikes me as a very regressive policy.
I don't think that will ever be coming up, but because if you're purchasing a house that's out on the water and you're in a flood zone, you probably have a larger income, or you should have a larger income, and purchasing flood insurance should be one of those things that you think about before you make the decision to buy the house.
It doesn't always work that way, especially in established communities. A lot of times people have been in a home for a long time and they aren't wealthy. It's not a new purchase for them. And then as those locations become desirable, other wealthy folks move in, and it really starts pushing up the cost of living for folks that were already there. And in places other than Pinellas County in particular, you have some of the poorest people are in these high-risk areas because they're not desirable the way we think about it here. So it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, it is. I was in New Orleans when Bigger Waters came out, and I'm not completely familiar with all the coastal areas here, but certainly in that area you have very low-income oystermen, fishermen living out in fish camps, things like that. And that was, it's not always this mindset that the wealthy. I mean, it just strikes me as a real potential leverage point. I mean, that if you're talking about the need for rate increases, well, certainly those who can afford the increase in the desirable coastal homes should pay more sooner than those, obviously, who are of lower income.
Part of the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act does call for a number of studies, including a coastal or like a community flood insurance program study and other types of studies for subsidies and, like based on the income. But it's a study that has to be completed, and they take quite a bit of time. We are at coming up to reauthorization, still are working on several of these studies, and some of them are not even due to Congress until the time that they're supposed to be voting on the bill. And they are needing that information like 180 days prior to voting on the bill, so that way they can create a bill that's created for the study. So it's very difficult with timing and getting all of that in and getting all that information in.
Do you have any idea on the amount of money that FEMA pumped out to people that were underinsured or uninsured during Katrina? Because I know there was lots and lots of money that was given as federal assistance after Katrina.
There is a lot of money that is given out in disaster assistance, and a lot of people look to disaster assistance as a replacement for flood insurance. And it's a very, very risky thing to do, because disaster assistance has to be, of course, a presidentially declared disaster. To collect, it has to be your primary residence. And people don't realize you can collect disaster assistance even when you have flood insurance. It can cover some things that flood insurance will not cover. So I don't have the actual cost, but I do know that it's supposed to work with the flood insurance. It's not supposed to be a replacement for it.
Back there.
Wasn't one of the provisions of bigger water zone is that you couldn't get disaster assistance if you did not have insurance?
No, disaster assistance is a separate, and it's its own separate thing. It may have been part of BW12, but it definitely was not part of the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act.
Is there any effort to incentivize not rebuilding in areas that will flood? If you have flood insurance and you only can collect the payout on the flood insurance if you rebuild where you were, then that incentivizes staying in a place that you shouldn't be. Is there any effort to, one, either put in areas where you have very affluent and wealthy and the property values have gone up, a deductible to over $500,000, so that you would choose perhaps not to rebuild, or you'd be covering most of the costs yourselves to help cover that, and or incentivizing if you pay out, you move to a different area and rebuild in another area that's not going to be as flood prone. Because otherwise we're just continuing to pay and subsidize for people to continue to build in places they shouldn't be building.
Okay, you've touched on a few different things there. So first of all, if somebody's property is damaged to more than 50% of the cost of the actual structure, they're going to have to build up to current code, which is obviously going to be allowed, but they're going to have to build up above the BFE if there's a freeboard. Is it you guys that has like a 4-foot freeboard? So in Indian Shores, if your house is on the ground and it blows out during a storm, and you come back and it's 60% of the damage of the original cost. You're going to have to rebuild 4 feet above base flood now if you're in Indian Shores. So you can choose to rebuild or you can choose to sell your property. Some communities do also purchase property. So there is an acquisition, most communities have an acquisition program where they will purchase. And then if they change the zoning on that to open space, then they'll get additional CRS points and things like that. So there are things in place, yes, to not say, no, you can't build back there necessarily, but to maybe say you're going to build above or you're going to sell it.
Lisa, can't you take the FEMA money and go if you wanted to relocate? But you still have to be, like,
well,
say your home is completely destroyed. Are you able to take the disaster recovery money and move?
I'll give that to the insurance person.
I mean, yes, but you still have the property that you own,
right.
So you still have to sell that property. So that
Right.
could be kind of an issue there, because what happens when the community is decimated and you're trying to sell property that's not really desirable anymore?
Well, I do know with the Katrina recovery, the FEMA, you were given the option to rebuild your existing lot, or I think it was actually, it was more to rebuild on a different lot. I don't know how heavily it might have been subsidized or incentivized, but it's a great question and consideration for sure.
So we've actually discussed that in the city of St. Petersburg in our comprehensive plans and such. And going back to what the first gentleman talked about is because we've built out utility lines, because we've built out roads into places like Shore Acres, we now have a responsibility to maintain those. And the question was raised at one point, at what point do we abandon those? And, can we do that legally because we're already providing service to them? And, we all know that Shore Acres floods on a regular basis. The problem is that we're so built out trying to incentivize somebody to move into a less desirable area that's not close to the water where they can't park their boat. It's really hard to sell that. So the only thing that is probably going to change that is the insurance increases, is that eventually people of low income are not going to be able to afford that. And it goes back to what Maya was saying over here, is that I get calls every day from people that are retired and they bought their house 30 years ago and they've had it completely paid off, and they're like, well, I'm living in this area and I don't want flood insurance. because it's so expensive, but I know I need it. You know, what do I do? Or we have these people that still owe on their house, and because they bought 30 years ago and they still they have a 30-year note or whatever, and they don't quite have it paid off. What do they do in that short amount of time, and how do they pay those high premiums? So it's something that we're aware of at the city. We don't have a good answer though for it because we're so built out.
I think another challenge too from the community side is a lot of these programs will not make you whole. So there's a lot of gaps between the risk that's being transferred versus what the actual risk is to the community, and how you guys are going to provide for the citizens and their living. You know, flood insurance will only get you so far. Disaster assistance is going to get you less than flood insurance. So there's still going to be responsibilities that pressure for local governments to provide things to citizens that their way of life is not going to be the same again. So when we think broader picture of sea level rise and community resilience, there has to be things like changes to land use decisions and some other things if we're going to be a more resilient community. These are just some methods to transfer the risk, but it's not really protecting us in whole. So we need to look at some other solutions.
And you know, I think also it's about letting nature take its course. I mean, eventually when the sea comes in and they can't get to their house, they're not going to live there anymore. Or they're, you know, I mean, that's, and I hate to say that because we're not being proactive or whatever, but you can't, because we have such a huge tax base in Shore Acres and Snell Isle and places like that, we can't just say, hey, well, you guys need to move, because what if they move to another county? What if they move to another state? Then St. Petersburg's lost this huge tax base. So we really have to let them kind of come to that organically on their own and say, oh man, you know, the ocean was 10 feet from my house, now it's 3. Maybe I might want to move or sell that property.
I just one kind of factual question for Noah. When you applied for the modification for the city of St. Pete, you said you were just putting in new stuff. Did you have to have your entire packet there? Did you have to resubmit for what you had gotten points for in the past to get to the 6?
No, because they already had that. We just basically resubmitted what was new for us. So, for instance, we hadn't submitted the PPI before I came on, and so I wanted to get the points for that PPI. And you saw some of the other outreach activities. We were doing a lot more outreach activities, so we wanted to get those as well. And that was all they required. Now, come our verification, they're going to ask for everything that we submitted plus everything we had before.
The PPI has to be approved through commission first before you can get credit, correct? Correct.
So, Lisa, this might be for you. So one of the things Thomas Hawkins' presentation talked about was the credit you can get for things like living shorelines and oyster reef creation. How can organizations like mine with an environmental focus that are working on these kind of projects, how can we better link up with the LMS or your CRS coordinator so that we can develop these projects in areas where they're most needed and where they would get the biggest bang for the buck in the future for residents?
So ISO is pretty finicky about how they score the 400 series. So I would definitely bring ISO in the loop, and I would recommend maybe just starting with a meeting or a phone call and vetting through it to make sure that you hit all the things that you need to hit to be able to get those points.
So like the local government partner would do that?
Right.
I mean,
right. Exactly.
I think another thing too, when I used to work for Hillsborough County, I don't know if Gene left, but one of the things we did to help sell the program there was, you know, like you're saying you could potentially have 3,000 points. And you know that particular 400 activity might get you 60 points or whatever it is. You know, you can do the math and the savings to your community. Like Hillsborough County was getting $6 million in savings. And we could say that this activity, you know, was 12% of that overall savings. So it helped us to go to Public Works and say, by your contribution to this program, you're saving the residents $2.5 million annually. And you know, if you can help, you know, show the math to TBEP or whoever and say, you know, this is the benefit. Yeah, it's a $200,000 project, but we're potentially saving the residents $1 million locally. You know, that might help sell that activity. besides just what you see.
So to follow up, I think that if you have an idea, you should definitely submit it to the CRS coordinator or the LMS chair, whoever it is, just like when I asked you for information. So if you're thinking of an idea off the coast of Pinellas, involve the town or the city, involve the county, let us know what your idea is so that we can do some research, and then all of us can kind of work together to talk to ISO and make sure that it's something that's viable for points and the cost-benefit analysis that Chris just mentioned.
Lisa, what if it's part of some of the good work that's already been done in the Tampa Bay area? You know, some of those restoration projects, is that kind of impossible to get back credited for, or get credited now for work that's been done?
It depends, really. I mean, I'd have to look at it on a project-by-project basis, to be honest with you. So if you send over the information and, you know, let us know what it is that you've actually done, then we can try to line it up and see where there might be points available. So definitely do send us that information.
I think something maybe at one of the CRS working group meetings, having maybe Baywatch and us.
We can do that. Yeah, because that's what I'm thinking is like there's no real. Like the benefit isn't for Tampa Baywatch to submit stuff for you, but it's for you to realize that that's going out there, so you can get the information that way.
Right, and that's what this call for information was. If you're doing something, let us know, because we don't know that you're doing it. So if you let us know, and
there's so much oyster work that's being done in Tampa Bay.
So NOAA coordinates the CRS user group meetings, and they're quarterly right now. We can probably throw in an extra meeting if we need to. The next meeting we've already got the agenda set for. We're going to be going through the 500 series. Noah and I are going to do a training on that so that we can get the people that attend some credits. So hopefully you can attend that. If you're not on the user group list, get on it with Noah. You got to send us the information, please, and then we can take a look at it.
And I'll just mention too those activities that are associated with the floodplain management plan or the local mitigation strategy, because I think all of our local mitigation strategies are multi-jurisdictional. There's a multiplier effect because it's not just benefiting the county, it's benefiting the jurisdictions that are also adopting that same local mitigation strategy. So there's lots of points, CRS points that can be involved.
Boils down to regulation, though. I mean, a lot of this is, it goes back to regulation. Are you enforcing this? Then you're going to get your points. So, I mean, we got to look at each project, I think.
And Maya, to answer your question, the PPI committee, I do have one of your representatives on the PPI committee, so we reach out to and find out what kind of outreach projects. I think that would be a great area to say, hey, we are doing this, can we get it through outreach, or this is what we're doing, and you can communicate that through the PPI committee.
Chris Moore.
I just wanted to continue that conversation because of just how absolutely critical I think it can be in moving the needle on implementing adaptation and mitigation strategies. Lisa, is the county's score reduction official yet, or with the CRS score reduction?
Yes, Pinellas County is a Class 5, and those new insurance rates went into effect on May 1st.
And so that basically, from what I understand, is equates to between $3 and $5 million in annual premium savings to residents. Annual being a very important word. Now, of course, rates are going up, so that is going to decrease slightly. But, and I don't know if your guys' score is official yet, but it sounds like from what I've heard, you guys are definitely headed toward a reduction as well. And so just looking at that, that's probably half of the county's population, roughly, between those two, unincorporated residents and city residents. So you could be talking anywhere on a low end of, 3-4 million a year in annual savings. So I think CC mentioned the importance of that for elected officials to come re-election time to talk about what they've done. I just really think as a community we need to carry that conversation a lot further. I mean, it's the cost benefit, savings that can be easily, it sounds like, demonstrated. And also from, no one likes to raise taxes, but if you can show a way that you're either going to come in net neutral by the savings you're implementing, or even still showing, you'll save more than you're raising, it offers a tremendous opportunity to think about funding sources for some of these very expensive adaptation strategies that are required.
So just going from a class 6 to a class 5 for St. Petersburg, we'll be saving, we're saving around 8 million right now a year annually. It'll go to 10 million a year.
10 tied to that.
It's 10 million total. It's 2 million more is what we'll be saving, but.
See, you're right there. You're talking about 5 million between on the low end from just half the residents. So whatever the rest of the communities are doing, I mean, it's mind-boggling the potential there to me to make the case for implementing these strategies.
Yeah, the county went from over 3 million to over 5 million in savings per year. And one of the insurance agents that's actually, she's on the Pinellas County PPI and also the Reddington Shores PPI, she sent me an email and she said, so I rated this house in April and it came out however much. And she said, but we didn't finish it. Something got tied up. So we had to redo it in May. So it was like a week difference in time from the rating. And it dropped $600 because of the discount going from 15% to 25%. It was in unincorporated area. So, and that's just one house.
However you want to talk about it, that's a tax cut.
Great. Okay, so I got one here and one here.
What is the impact, if any, on the community rating class for illegal enclosures?
Oh, that's a touchy subject. Okay, so yes, illegal enclosures. So you built your house up on piers like you were supposed to, and then you went and you enclosed the bottom and made a mother-in-law suite. And without, of course, you're not going to get a permit for that. So you did this without a permit and somehow didn't get caught doing it. This is a huge problem in Monroe County. This is their number one issue. So they're obviously out of compliance. So the floodplain coordinator for that, community needs to go out and reprimand them and say, you need to take this out. Give them bills for being non-compliant and all that. And then eventually they can pass it up to FEMA for a 316. What is it? Which one? They pass it up to FEMA, then FEMA comes back at them and says, what is it? 1316. So FEMA will, you guys won't be able to give them insurance basically, because now FEMA has a stop on it. Until you remove that enclosure and come back into compliance, you cannot have insurance, flood insurance. It's not available to you. But that's like a last resort thing. So for these people that own their houses outright and they don't have flood insurance and they don't care about flood insurance and they figure, I'll just build a new house when it blows over, there's not a lot you can do other than cite them for being non-compliant. Because it's not really going to affect them.
If there are a lot of non-compliant properties in a community, does that impact the CRS?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not enforcing your regulations, technically you could get kicked out. So it's important for the community to enforce these regulations, and they do. If they know that something's going on, they'll go out and issue a citation. There's a recent one in, I believe you got the phone call about it, in Tarpon Springs. Tarpon Springs had a non-compliant, I believe it was an enclosure below. There was something non-compliant about it. And I had an insurance agent call me asking me about it. And it was a 1316. Basically, the city couldn't get them to fix whatever the problem was. So it never got mitigated. And now the building is not allowed to have flood insurance. So now I don't know how that's affected with a private company.
Okay, well, we have about 5 more minutes for the discussion, so we'll take this question and then Paula.
Okay, just from a community perspective, I want to build on what you were saying in terms of the opportunity for getting the information out. I live in Hillsborough County in the city of Tampa, and I had no idea we had any of this stuff going, number one. So obviously the word's not getting out to the community, but with the savings, the money, the economic impact of this, you have a real opportunity to market, not only educate the newly elected or soon to be elected legislature that's coming into place and the others that are running for office and our elected officials, which it's really important information for them to have and great for them to be able to quote numbers on the savings that we're getting out of these decisions we're making so that you'll get more support in your agencies later when you make recommendations and including things in the comp plan. But also, this is like a wonderful opportunity to reach out to media to tell the story about how much you're saving. And if you work with the public relations of the cities and the counties and so forth, that you really do let the public know about what the savings are to the public, so you get public support for some of the things you're trying to do, it's going to help a whole lot, both in the education of them in terms of supporting from the community, but also in terms of helping them understand that you actually are doing something good in government, which, you know, is sometimes not believed. So I would suggest you really need to do some serious marketing of what you've done and what you've accomplished.
You know, I'll address that with Hillsborough County specifically. The Regional Planning Council is working with Hillsborough County staff on their upcoming cycle verification visit. That will be in October, and our goal there is Hillsborough County has a 5 rating, and we're looking to maintain that rating of 5 for Hillsborough County. Beyond that, we'll be looking at providing them with a roadmap that will likely include some of the things that you're talking about, developing a program for public information and ways that they could get to an even lower rating, which is even more savings for people. So the Regional Planning Council is involved with that. We have some of our partners involved as well, working with Hillsborough County on that particular issue.
Okay, and to that end, don't forget about the neighborhood organizations like Neighborhood Watch and the neighborhood groups like that, and the League of Women Voters and other organizations that are regional and countywide and so forth that can help to disseminate information and help you be a part of that plan and help lower the ratings if we coordinate like the best rate program.
The Pinellas County just did a press release. I just finished revising it yesterday. It's probably going to go out early next week. And the PPI committee developed a brochure. They're in the back of the room right now. We need to update them with the new information on the new rating, but we also have it on that brochure, which gets handed out everywhere. It gets mailed out. The information is going to be in the Utility Talk little flyers. So we put the information out there, and a lot of the projects in the program for public information that Cece talked about, because flood economics is one of our topics, we have that information in a lot of the projects.
I think adding to it, if it hasn't been done already, compiling the aggregate impact, not just Pinellas County, but the region of any score reductions for every community that's done it, and coming up with as a region or as a county, we've reduced premiums for our residents by X, and just obviously a bigger number will have a bigger impact.
Yeah, if the municipalities themselves can get, we save this for our constituents, I think it would have a bigger impact than trying to get people involved. If you say, yeah, this is what we're doing, well, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And that information is not getting out right now.
And Reddington Shores just did their flood and hurricane information meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we presented there and told the residents, you know, you need to look on your insurance bill for your discount, and they were very interested in seeing all the work that the town has been doing to work on their CRS rating and make sure that the residents are getting their discount on their insurance. So the information's being presented. Maybe we need to do it through the LMS as a larger scale project, though, like Chris said.
And 1 second, I'm just going to take Paula's question as the final question, and then if I could ask the panelists to just think of maybe some sort of short closing thought to share with the audience in a second. So Paula's question.
Lisa, could you just go through that scenario again? A homeowner goofs up, they build below base flood, they of course didn't have a permit. Okay, kind of go through a couple of scenarios. If staff finds it and we tell them to remove it and they take care of it, we don't need to report it to FEMA, do we?
I do not think so, but I don't want to answer that question because I'm not certain. I can look it up for you, though. I'll find out, and just email me and I'll respond to you because I'm not absolutely positive.
Okay.
You might want to document it though to show that.
Yeah, obviously keep your documentation. You document everything. If there's one thing I've learned in this whole floodplain field, document everything. And speaking of document, take one of those flyers because that's part of your documentation for step 3B under 510.
If you do the enforcement action on them, either through a submit to rate and you're checking it out, or you take them to code board and we're finding them or whatever, and they do not come into compliance, you report it, obviously they're getting a running fine from the city, you report it to FEMA, and then if it's sometime in the future they actually come into compliance, they are never eligible, that structure is not eligible for flood insurance?
It's eligible once they come back into compliance.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
They have to come back, yes. They lose it while it's out of compliance. Once it comes back into a compliance, then it's eligible again. There are time frames associated with it, though, and on the FEMA website, it's all spelled out. Between, you know, this many days and this many days this happens, and this many days this happens.
And then would they be reassessed at the real current value?
Oh, so that's an insurance person question.
If they were out of
Okay, so a couple questions there. One, if we get an application and on the application the lowest floor for rating is below the base flood, this could be an elevated building where the enclosure is not eligible for exemption, or it could be a non-elevated building where that lowest floor is below. Every file that we do, that we issue, once the file gets issued, it goes to FEMA. We don't have any control over what does or does not go to FEMA. It's all FEMA's property, so it all goes to them. And FEMA reviews that and will contact the community officials to review the data that they received. And so that's how that plays in. If we get updated information showing that the enclosure, they added vents and it's unfinished, it's used for only parking, storage, access, we re-rate it. It, of course, makes it, then they get their CRS credit back, and that goes back up to FEMA. Then they know it's been corrected and the file is fine. So there is some coordination with the companies once we issue it and we send it back.
She just wants to know if, so it's out of compliance, they've been cited for it, they're not fixing it, goes to FEMA, so maybe somebody else buys the house or whatever, they fix it. So now it's mitigated, it's above base flood, there's no more enclosure, they put their flood vents in, it's only storage now. Can they now get insurance?
Absolutely. Once the 1316 is lifted, we can reissue a flood policy.
I didn't know if there was a timeline on it, because I know there's like, between this time and that time, something happens.
No, we just need a copy of the letter, the release letter.
Okay, so I could just get the panel to share some final thoughts. If you have someone, you don't have to go in order, because I know I just sprung this on you, so if anyone is.
I'll go first. Of course, you're seeing a lot of private market carriers trying to enter the market because they're finding it as profitable, but a lot of those private market carriers don't take things into consideration like community rating systems. So it's going to be very interesting seeing how those carriers work with something like an elevated building that they built the mother-in-law suite on the first floor, because they will insure it, but it's going to build it out of compliance with the CRS. So I just think that's going to be one of those things that you're going to see. It's going to be very interesting seeing how that works with FEMA and those private market carriers.
One of our most active committees, we have several committees with the Florida Floodplain Managers Association. One of our most active committees is our CRS Insurance Committee. And so I'm hearing the flood economics. I mean, I love that message. And so that is definitely something that from an association standpoint, we could gather all of that information that we're talking about, that cumulative savings, and have something out there for that. So that's just one of the ideas that I got from you. Thank you.
I would say that if you are in Pinellas County or one of the municipalities, you definitely want to visit the FTP site where we've put all our documentation. There are a lot of things that you can piggyback off of what the county is doing. This real estate agent disclosure program that we just started, that CC mentioned, is going to take care of your activity points for the whole county. We've designed it so that it's a county-wide project. We don't have the documentation for it. It's still a work in progress, but once we have it, and then we'll tackle another one. So we're really trying to help our municipalities through the process, as well as improve our own program.
Did you say FPC?
There's an FTP site out that Raheem, I believe, sent to all. I believe Raheem sent it to all the municipalities. If you don't have it, email me and I'll send you a link to it.
So what I really took away, and I heard from several people, is more communication. And, you know, we are actively trying to do that with our PPI and stuff, but obviously there's going to be a little bit of a lag. And we can only put out so much information and tell people so much stuff. They actually have to read it. They have to understand it. They have to call me and say, hey, explain to me this stuff. So I hear what is being said, and we want to reach out and we want to educate as many people, because I think this is a huge hot topic. So thank you again for reiterating that, because I like to keep that on my my radar, and that's something I can pass up to my council members and such.
Again, thank you so much for inviting us to talk, and again, I love talking about flood insurance, so thank you. Anytime, the clear communications portion of the FEMA changes that are coming up. Again, it's very important that you pay attention to, if you get a notice from your insurance carrier asking for additional information, it's very important to, it's possibly going to affect your renewal, to respond to that. Keep your agent in the loop. And again, communities, sometimes you might be asked for information on current or prior map information, and assisting, you know, policyholders and residents with that information is definitely going to be very valuable. So, thank you.
Okay, well, let's thank our entire panel.